The smell of betrayal is sharper than sawdust and twice as bitter. I learned that sitting in my half-finished basement workshop at 2 in the morning, rain hammering the windows like an angry debt collector, while my wife of 10 years stumbled through our front door with lies dripping off her like cheap perfume. My name is Brooks Carvin, and I'm 42 years old. I broker commercial real estate deals for a living, which means I'm professionally trained to spot when someone's trying to sell me a load of garbage. Tonight, my wife Mara was peddling the biggest pile I'd ever seen. "Brooks, what are you doing up?" Her voice carried that particular strain of someone caught red-handed trying to sneak past a sleeping guard dog. Except this guard dog had been wide awake, nursing a whiskey and contemplating the architectural flaws in his marriage. I looked up from the cabinet I'd been pretending to sand. Mara stood in the doorway, her museum curator sophistication somewhat diminished by the fact that her hair looked like she'd been wrestling with a tornado, and her lipstick had taken a vacation from her actual lips. "Couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my voice level. "You know how it is when your mind's racing about work stuff." She nodded too quickly like a bobblehead in an earthquake. "Right, work. I had to stay late again. The new exhibition is just, it's consuming everything." The new exhibition. Right. If by exhibition she meant Quinn Vossen, the married architect with the ego the size of his firm's downtown office building, then sure, it was consuming everything, including my marriage. "Must be some exhibition," I said, setting down my sandpaper. "Third time this week you've had to work past midnight." Mara's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "You know how demanding the board can be. Mrs. Henderson specifically requested that I personally oversee every detail of the installation. Mrs. Henderson had been gone for 6 months. I'd sold her estate to a developer last spring, but I didn't mention that. Instead, I stood up, brushing sawdust off my jeans, and walked over to my workbench, where I'd been organizing tools. "Funny thing happened today," I said, picking up a hammer and testing its weight. "I was fixing that sticky drawer in your dresser, you know, the one that's been jamming for weeks, and I found something interesting." The color drained from Mara's face faster than water through a broken pipe. "Oh?" I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a sleek black phone I'd never seen before. A phone that definitely wasn't the iPhone she carried in her purse every day. A phone that had been hidden under a pile of silk scarves, like a dirty secret. "Care to explain why you need 2 phones, honey?" If silence had consequences, I would have felt them immediately. Mara stared at the device in my hand like I was holding a live grenade, which, in a way, I was. That's just a work phone. The museum requires all senior staff to carry them for emergencies." "Interesting." I powered on the device. "Because according to the text messages I've been reading for the past hour, the only emergency you've been handling involves getting naked with Quinn Vossen at the Riverside Hotel." The look that crossed her face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent wondering if I was losing my mind. It was the expression of someone watching their carefully constructed house of lies collapse in real time. "Brooks, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You've always been creative." I scrolled through the messages, reading highlights aloud. "Tuesday, can't wait to feel you inside me again." Wednesday, tell your wife you're working late. I need you all night. Thursday, the way you made me scream in that hotel room should be illegal. Each word hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step backward, bumping into the doorframe. And here's my personal favorite, I continued, finding the photo that had stopped my heart when I first saw it. A lovely selfie of you and Quinn, both very naked, both very satisfied, both very much not at a museum board meeting. Mara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It's not, we didn't, it just happened, Brooks. I never meant for you to find out this way. Oh, so there was a better way for me to find out my wife is screwing around? Should I have walked in on you two? Maybe caught you in our bed? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Mara? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like my wife decided our marriage wasn't worth the paper it's printed on. She straightened up, and I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with. Strong, defiant, uncompromising. Unfortunately, she was using those qualities to defend the indefensible. You want to know what it's like? It's like being married to a man who's more interested in his tools than his wife. It's like living with someone who thinks a romantic evening is discussing property values over takeout Chinese food. It's like being slowly suffocated by mediocrity. The words stung because there was enough truth in them to hurt, but not enough to justify what she'd done. So, you decided to fix our problems by jumping into bed with a married man? Quinn understands me. He appreciates art, culture, beauty. He sees me as more than just a convenient accessory to your blue-collar success story. I laughed, and it sounded harsh, even to my own ears. Blue-collar success story? Sweetheart, I've made more money in the last 5 years than your precious Quinn sees in a decade. The only difference is I don't need to wear a $1,000 suit to feel important. It's not about money. No, it's about respect. And you've shown me exactly how much respect you have for our marriage, our vows, and me. I walked over to my video camera, the one I used to document construction projects, and held it up. Smile, honey. Say hello to your divorce attorney. Her face went white. You recorded this? Every word, every lie, every pathetic excuse. I set the camera down and looked at her directly. You want to know what's really funny? I actually came down here tonight planning to surprise you with something special. See that cabinet I was working on? I was building it to display your grandmother's china collection. The one you always said deserved a proper showcase. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I was fresh out of sympathy. But here's what's going to happen instead. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling my lawyer. By tomorrow afternoon, you're going to discover that your cozy little love nest with Quinn is about to become very public knowledge. And by tomorrow evening, you're going to learn that crossing a man who builds things for a living means he also knows exactly how to tear them down. I picked up the burner phone and slipped it back into my pocket. You can sleep in the guest room tonight, or better yet, call Quinn. I'm sure he'd love to explain to his wife why he needs to provide emergency housing for his mistress. Mara was full-on sobbing now, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd been living in my house and spending my money while she spread her legs for another man. Brooks, please, we can work through this. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I love you. No, Mara. You love the lifestyle I provide. You love the house, the car, the credit cards, the social status. But you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have spent the last 3 months auditioning for your replacement behind my back. I headed toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. Oh, and honey, you might want to get tested. I have no idea how many other art appreciation sessions Quinn has been conducting, but I'd hate for you to catch something that penicillin can't cure. As I climbed the stairs, leaving her sobbing in my workshop, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. The fog of doubt and self-recrimination that had been clouding my judgment was gone, replaced by cold, hard purpose. Mara thought she was smart, sneaking around behind my back, playing me for a fool. Quinn probably thought he was clever, seducing another man's wife, while his own sat at home none the wiser. They were both about to learn that underestimating Brooks Carvin was the biggest mistake of their pathetic lives. I had spent 20 years learning how to build things that last. Now it was time to put those skills to use, tearing down everything they thought they could take from me. The rain kept hammering the windows as I locked my bedroom door and started planning their destruction. The next morning arrived gray and unforgiving, like a hangover made of weather. I was up at 5:30, same as always. But instead of my usual routine of coffee and market reports, I was plotting the systematic destruction of two people's lives. It felt surprisingly therapeutic. Mara had apparently taken my suggestion about calling Quinn, because her side of the bed hadn't been slept in. Part of me wondered if she'd gone crawling to him for comfort, spilling everything about our confrontation. The smarter part of me hoped she had. Panicked people make stupid decisions, and I was counting on both of them to be very, very stupid. My first stop was the office, where my assistant Zane was already at his desk despite the early hour. Zane Morrison was 26 years old, looked like he'd stepped out of a tech startup commercial, and had the kind of computer skills that probably violated several federal laws. He was also loyal as a golden retriever and twice as eager to please. Morning, boss, he said, looking up from his triple monitor setup. You're here early. Everything okay? Zane, I need you to do some research for me. Completely confidential, completely off the books. Can you handle that? His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Absolutely. What kind of research? I handed him a piece of paper with Quinn Vosson's full name, his firm's information, and what little I knew about his personal details. I need everything you can find on this man. Financial records, business dealings, personal information, social media, parking tickets, library fines, everything. And I need it done quietly. Zane studied the paper with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient manuscripts. How quietly are we talking? The kind of quietly that never happened. He grinned. My favorite kind of project. Give me 24 hours. You've got 12. While Zane worked his digital magic, I had other preparations to make. My second stop was the Hammered Nail, a dive bar that served as the unofficial headquarters for every contractor, builder, and blue-collar entrepreneur in the city. It was barely 10 in the morning, but the place was already populated by guys grabbing coffee and breakfast before heading to job sites. The owner, Benji Kowalski, was a mountain of a man who'd played offensive line for the State University before a knee injury redirected his career toward hospitality. He had the kind of face that looked friendly until you crossed him, and ears that caught every piece of gossip within a 50-mile radius. Brooks, early start today? Benji called out from behind the bar, where he was restocking beer bottles with the efficiency of a factory machine. Something like that. I slid onto a bar stool and accepted the coffee he poured without being asked. Benji, you hear much about the architectural scene in town? His eyebrows rose slightly. Benji had a nose for drama that could smell trouble from 3 counties away. Depends on who's asking and why they want to know. Let's just say I'm considering some property investments and want to know which firms are solid and which ones might be less reliable. Benji leaned against the bar, lowering his voice to conspiracy level. Well, since you're asking, there's been some interesting chatter about Vossen and Associates lately. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Oh? Word is they're in the running for that big municipal contract. You know, the new Civic Center project. Supposed to be worth about $15 million. But there's also talk that Quinn Vossen's been playing fast and loose with some of his business practices. What kind of fast and loose? Benji glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. The kind where he's been using his wife's legal connections to get inside information on competing bids. And the kind where he's been mixing personal expenses with business accounts to hide certain recreational activities. This was better than I'd hoped. Recreational activities? Hotel rooms that aren't for business meetings, if you catch my meaning. Expensive dinners for 2 that get written off as client entertainment. That sort of thing? I finished my coffee and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the market intelligence, Benji. Always good to know who you're dealing with. Anytime, Brooks. And hey, if you hear anything interesting about the architectural scene, you know where to find me. My third stop was the most important one, the office of Derek Mullins, my oldest friend and the most reliable contractor in the city. Derek and I had known each other since high school, where he'd been the guy who could fix anything mechanical, and I'd been the guy who could talk anyone into anything. We'd maintained that dynamic for 25 years. Derek's office was located in a converted warehouse that smelled like sawdust, motor oil, and honest work. I found him in his workshop, rebuilding the engine of a 1967 Mustang that he'd been almost finished restoring for the past decade. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he said without looking up from the engine block. Let me guess. You need something that's going to get both of us in trouble? What makes you think I need something? Because you've got that look. The same look you had in high school when you talked me into putting plastic wrap over Principal Morrison's toilet seat. I laughed despite everything. This is a little more sophisticated than high school pranks. Derek finally looked up, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. Lay it on me. I told him everything. The affair, the confrontation, the evidence, and my plans for revenge. Derek listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or grunting in understanding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that had gotten us both suspended from school more than once. So what do you need me to do? For starters, I need you to help me with a little automotive maintenance. What kind of automotive maintenance? The kind that's going to strand my cheating wife at exactly the wrong moment in exactly the wrong place. Derek's smile widened. Now, you're talking my language. That afternoon, while Mara was presumably at the museum pretending to work, Derek and I paid a visit to the employee parking garage. Mara's BMW was parked in its usual spot, gleaming silver and immaculate. She was obsessive about that car, had it detailed every month and treated every tiny scratch like a personal tragedy. You sure about this? Derek asked, pulling on latex gloves. Once we start down this road, there's no going back. I've been thinking about going back for months, I said, kneeling beside the rear tire. I'm done with going back. We worked quickly and efficiently. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would cause an accident. Just a few minor adjustments that would ensure her car would fail her at the most inconvenient possible moment. A slow leak in one tire, a loose connection on the battery terminal, and a tiny obstruction in the door lock mechanism that would make it jam at the worst possible time. Beautiful work, Derek said, admiring our handiwork. She's going to have a very bad day. That's the idea. By the time I got back to the office, Zane was practically vibrating with excitement. He'd spread printouts across his desk like a conspiracy theorist mapping government cover-ups. Boss, you're going to love this, he said, gesturing at the papers. Your boy Quinn is dirty, like really dirty. Show me. Zane launched into his findings with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a grand jury. Quinn Vossen wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was cheating on his taxes, his business partners, and probably his golf score. He's been routing personal expenses through the business for years, Zane explained, pointing to highlighted bank statements. Hotel rooms, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, all written off as business expenses. But here's the really good part. He's been using his wife's position as a legal consultant to get inside information on municipal contracts. His wife works for the city? Better. She works for the law firm that handles municipal contract reviews. And look at this. Zane pulled up a series of emails on his screen. She's been feeding him information about competing bids for the past 2 years. I studied the evidence, feeling a familiar surge of satisfaction. It was the same feeling I got when a complex real estate deal finally came together. All the pieces clicking into place with mathematical precision. Zane, you beautiful genius. How did you get all this? He looked slightly embarrassed. Let's just say Quinn's password security is about as solid as his moral character. His business email password is architecture123, and his personal email is quinnvossen2023. I've seen more security at a lemonade stand. And this is all admissible? If it accidentally fell into the right hands, sure. Hypothetically speaking. I gathered up the papers and smiled at my young protege. Zane, remind me to give you a raise. Does this mean I get to find out what you're planning to do with all this information? You'll know when everyone else knows. But trust me, it's going to be spectacular. That evening, I sat in my workshop again, but this time, I wasn't sanding cabinets or nursing wounded feelings. I was planning a campaign that would make Sherman's March to the Sea look like a casual stroll through the park. Mara and Quinn thought they were so clever, sneaking around behind everyone's backs, stealing moments of passion while their spouses played the role of oblivious fools. They thought they were the protagonists in some romantic drama, star-crossed lovers fighting against the constraints of boring, conventional marriages. They were about to discover they weren't the heroes of this story. They were the villains. And every good story needs its villains to get exactly what they deserve. I opened my laptop and started typing an email. The recipient was someone I'd never met, but who was about to become my most important ally in this war. Her name was Raina Favren, and she was Quinn Vossen's wife. It was time to even the odds. Raina Favren agreed to meet me at Café Luna, a quiet coffee shop downtown that catered to lawyers and business people who valued discretion over atmosphere. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where we could talk without being overheard. I was nervous, which surprised me. I'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but sitting there waiting to meet my wife's lover's wife felt like preparing for the most important presentation of my career. She walked in at exactly 3 o'clock, and I recognized her immediately from the photos Zane had found. Raina was striking in an understated way, tall, elegant, with prematurely silver hair that she wore like a crown, and eyes that missed nothing. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. Mr. Carvin? She extended a manicured hand. Raina Favren. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wasn't sure you would. She sat down across from me, studying my face with the intensity of a judge evaluating testimony. Your email was intriguing. You said you had information about my husband that I needed to hear. I slid a manila envelope across the table. I think it's better if you see for yourself. Raina opened the envelope and began examining the contents. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts, bank records. Her expression never changed, but I watched her grip tighten on the papers as she read through the evidence of her husband's betrayal. After several minutes, she looked up. How long have you known? I confirmed it 3 days ago. I suspect it's been going on for about 3 months. I see. She placed the papers back in the envelope with surgical precision. And what exactly do you want from me, Mr. Carvin? I want them to pay for what they've done to us. But I can't do it alone. Raina was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street beyond. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, but cold as winter steel. Quinn thinks I don't know about his affairs. This isn't his first, you understand. But it is going to be his last. You knew? I'm a legal consultant, Mr. Carvin. I make my living by paying attention to details that other people miss. Quinn's been sloppy for years, but I chose to overlook it because it was convenient. Our marriage was a business arrangement that benefited both our careers. She turned back to me, and I saw something dangerous flickering in her eyes. But this time, he's crossed a line. Using my professional connections to gain advantages for his firm? That doesn't just threaten our marriage, it threatens my career and my reputation. That I cannot forgive. So you'll help me? Mr. Carvin, I'm not just going to help you. I'm going to ensure that when this is over, neither Quinn nor your wife will ever recover from the damage we're about to inflict. We spent the next hour planning our strategy with the methodical precision of generals preparing for battle. Raina had access to information and resources that complemented my own intelligence perfectly. More importantly, she had the legal expertise to ensure that everything we did would be devastating, but completely above board. There's a museum fundraising gala next Friday night, I told her. Mara will be there, probably with Quinn as her date. It's the perfect venue for the first phase. Excellent. I'll make sure I'm invited as well. The museum board includes several clients of my firm. I'm sure they'd be delighted to have me attend. What about the second phase? Raina smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. Leave that to me. I have some ideas that I think you'll appreciate. The week that followed was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Every day I implemented small acts of sabotage designed to increase Mara's stress and paranoia without giving her any concrete reason to suspect I was behind them. Her car broke down twice, once in the museum parking lot during a board meeting, and once outside Quinn's office building. Both times, she had to call for help, creating awkward situations that drew unwanted attention to her presence in places she shouldn't have been. Her credit cards were mysteriously declined at a restaurant where she was having lunch with Quinn, forcing him to pay and creating a scene that several of their mutual acquaintances witnessed and gossiped about. Her phone service experienced mysterious outages at crucial moments, preventing her from coordinating with Quinn and leaving her scrambling to maintain their secret communications. Meanwhile, Zane continued gathering intelligence with the enthusiasm of a digital hound. He'd discovered that Quinn had been embezzling money from his own firm to pay for his affairs, and that Raina's law firm was currently reviewing his company's bid for the municipal contract, a clear conflict of interest that could destroy both their careers. This is better than Christmas, Zane said, printing out another batch of incriminating documents. It's like they were trying to get caught. Arrogance, I replied. They thought they were smarter than everyone else. Well, they're about to get a reality check. The night of the museum gala, I dressed carefully in my best suit, a charcoal gray Armani that Mara had bought me for our anniversary 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived at the museum early and positioned myself near the bar where I could observe the entrance. The venue was elegant, filled with the kind of people who thought culture could be measured by the size of their charitable donations. Under normal circumstances, I would have felt out of place. Tonight I felt like a predator in his natural habitat. Mara arrived at 8:15, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was alone, which meant Quinn was being careful about appearances. but I knew he was there. I watched her work the room with practiced charm, kissing cheeks and making small talk with board members and donors. She was good at this, I had to admit. She belonged in this world in a way that I never quite had. At 8:30, Quinn made his entrance. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, handsome in a generic way. Wearing his success like expensive cologne, he moved through the crowd with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. I watched him and Mara carefully avoid each other while managing to stay within sight. They were playing their roles perfectly, the professional curator and the distinguished architect, both coincidentally attending the same social function. Anyone watching would see nothing suspicious. Anyone except me and Raina. She arrived at 9 o'clock, fashionably late and devastatingly beautiful, in a silver dress that made her look like a weapon forged from moonlight. She moved through the crowd like she owned the place, which, given her connections, she practically did. I watched Quinn's face when he spotted his wife. The color drained from his cheeks, and he nearly dropped his champagne glass. Clearly, he hadn't expected her to be there. Mara's reaction was even better. She actually took a step backward, bumping into a waiter and creating a minor commotion that drew several pairs of eyes in her direction. Raina approached me at the bar, and we exchanged pleasantries loud enough for nearby guests to hear. To anyone listening, we were simply two professionals, meeting at a social function. Love.
Smile, because this is the last good day of your life.
Cute. Remember that night? Your office party?
Daniel, take Sarah home. Something urgent came up.
I'm pregnant. Who do you think the father is?
Lovely event, she said, accepting a glass of wine from the bartender. Indeed, though I have to say some of the artwork is more interesting than others. Oh, I quite agree. Some pieces are clearly authentic masterworks, while others are obvious forgeries that fool no one with any real expertise. Our conversation continued in this vein for several minutes, each comment loaded with double meaning that would be lost on casual listeners, but devastating to anyone who understood the subtext. I saw Mara watching us from across the room, her face a mask of confusion and growing panic. She clearly recognized Raina, but couldn't understand why we were talking. Quinn, meanwhile, had retreated to the far side of the gallery, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and his wife. But Raina had positioned herself strategically. No matter where he moved, she remained in his line of sight, a constant reminder that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. I think it's time for phase 2, Raina murmured. Are you ready for this, Mr. Carvin? I've been ready for this for years. She walked directly across the room to where Mara was standing with a group of board members, discussing the evening's featured exhibition. Excuse me, Raina said, her voice carrying clearly across the gallery. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Raina Favren. Mara's face went pale. Yes, hello. Mara Solon. Ah, the curator. How wonderful. I've been so looking forward to meeting you. You see, I believe we have a mutual friend. The conversation around them had stopped. Other guests were beginning to pay attention, sensing drama in the way that social predators always do. I'm not sure I understand, Mara said weakly. Oh, I think you understand perfectly. Raina's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. But perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for that conversation. Would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? It wasn't really a request. Mara looked around desperately, but there was no escape. To refuse would create an even bigger scene. They walked toward the museum's private conference room, with half the party watching their departure with undisguised curiosity. I followed at a discreet distance, along with several other guests who sensed that something significant was about to happen. In the conference room, Raina closed the door and turned to face Mara, with the cold efficiency of an executioner. Mrs. Solon, I'm going to give you exactly one opportunity to explain why you've been sleeping with my husband. The words hit the room like a physical force. Mara actually staggered backward, her face cycling through shock, denial, and terror in rapid succession. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Raina opened her purse and withdrew a folder thick with documents, hotel receipts with both your names, text messages between your personal phones, photographs taken by hotel security cameras, bank records showing that Quinn has been using company funds to pay for your little adventures. She spread the evidence across the conference table, like a prosecutor presenting a case to a jury. Would you like me to continue, or would you prefer to start telling the truth? Mara collapsed into a chair, all pretense abandoned. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Long enough to prepare for this moment. Long enough to ensure that when I destroy your life, it stays destroyed. The door opened, and Quinn entered, looking like a man walking to his own execution. He'd clearly been listening outside and realized that denial was no longer an option. Raina, I can explain. No, Quinn, you really can't. She turned to face her husband with the same cold precision she'd shown Mara. 20 years of marriage, and this is how you repay me? By stealing from your own company to fund your pathetic midlife crisis? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to leave me for her? Or were you just going to keep using me for my professional connections while you screwed around with other men's wives? Quinn had no answer. Neither did Mara. They stood there like children, caught breaking their parents' most precious possessions, waiting for punishment they knew they deserved. Here's what's going to happen, Raina continued. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce. I'm also reporting Quinn's embezzlement to his business partners and the State Bar Association. Mrs. Solon, I'm sending copies of all this evidence to your museum board, along with a detailed explanation of how your affair has compromised the integrity of their institution. Raina, please, Quinn started. I'm not finished. Her voice cut through his pleading like a blade. I'm also sending everything to the Municipal Contract Review Board, along with documentation of how you use my position to gain illegal advantages in the bidding process. That should end your career quite nicely. She turned back to Mara. As for you, Mrs. Solon, I'm sure your husband will be very interested to learn about your extracurricular activities. I believe he's planning to discuss the situation with you very soon. That was my cue. I stepped into the room and both Mara and Quinn looked at me with expressions of absolute horror. Hello, darling, I said to Mara. Enjoying the party? The look on her face was worth every moment of pain she'd caused me. It was the expression of someone watching their entire world collapse in real time, knowing there was nothing they could do to stop it. Brooks, we need to talk, I finished. But not here. This is Mrs. Favren's show. Raina gathered up her evidence with business-like efficiency. I think we're finished here. Quinn, you have until tomorrow morning to remove your belongings from our house. After that, you'll be dealing with my attorneys. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back at the wreckage she'd created. Oh, and Mrs. Solon? You might want to start looking for a new job. Something tells me your current position is about to become available. As she left the room, I heard the sound of approaching voices. Other party guests who'd been waiting outside, eager to witness the aftermath of the drama they'd sensed building all evening. Mara and Quinn were about to face a room full of their peers, their professional colleagues, and their social circle, all of whom now knew exactly what kind of people they really were. I smiled and followed Raina out of the room. Behind me, I could hear Mara starting to cry, and Quinn trying desperately to explain the unexplainable to a crowd of people who would be gossiping about this moment for years to come. Phase 1 was complete, but this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the museum gala was more spectacular than I dared hope. By the next morning, news of the confrontation had spread through the city's professional circles like wildfire. Zane greeted me at the office with a stack of printed emails and social media posts, all buzzing with speculation about the museum scandal. Boss, you need to see this, he said, barely containing his excitement. It's everywhere. The local business journal, the arts newsletter, even the society page of the newspaper. They're calling it the biggest scandal in the museum's 50-year history. I scanned through the coverage, noting how the story had grown in the telling. By some accounts, Quinn had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. In others, Mar had been running a prostitution ring out of the museum basement. The truth was damaging enough, but gossip had a way of making everything worse. Any word from the museum board? I asked. Emergency meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Word is they're going to ask for Mara's resignation. And Quinn's firm? His partners called an emergency meeting too. Apparently, Raina delivered her evidence to them personally this morning, along with a detailed legal analysis of their potential liability. I felt a surge of admiration for my new ally. Raina Favren was proving to be even more ruthless than I'd hoped. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Phase 2 begins tonight. Meet me at Riverside Marina, Dock 7, 8 p.m. Come alone. RRF. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine business, but my mind was focused on the evening ahead. Whatever Raina had planned, I knew it would be devastating. She'd proven herself to be a strategist of the highest order, someone who understood that true revenge wasn't about momentary satisfaction. It was about permanent consequences. I arrived at the marina early, parking in the shadows where I could observe the area without being seen. The docks were mostly empty, with only a few boats showing signs of occupancy. Dock 7 was at the far end, isolated and dark. Raina arrived precisely on time, driving a black Mercedes that whispered money and power. She was dressed in dark clothing, practical but elegant, like a cat burglar with an MBA. "Mr. Carvin," she said, approaching my position, "thank you for coming. What did you have in mind?" She smiled, and in the dim light of the marina, it looked positively predatory. Something that will ensure our respective spouses never forget the consequences of their betrayal. She led me down the dock to where a sleek cabin cruiser was moored. The boat was dark, but I could see light coming from the cabin windows. "They're in there?" I asked. "Quinn owns this boat. It's where he's been bringing his conquests for years. He thinks I don't know about it. Tonight, he and your wife are having what they believe is a romantic reconciliation cruise." "What exactly are we going to do?" "We're going to give them a surprise they'll never forget." Raina produced a key from her purse. "As Quinn's wife, I have legal access to all his property, including this boat." We boarded quietly, moving toward the cabin where I could now hear voices. Mara's laugh, Quinn's deeper tones, the clink of glasses. They were celebrating, probably toasting their survival of the previous night's drama. They had no idea the worst was yet to come. Raina positioned herself at the cabin door, then looked at me. "Ready?" I nodded. She threw open the door and stepped inside. "Hello, darling. Mind if we join you?" The scene inside was exactly what I'd expected, and somehow worse than I'd imagined. Mara and Quinn were sprawled on the cabin's built-in sofa, partially dressed with champagne glasses and scattered clothing, telling the story of their evening's activities. Both of them froze, like deer in headlights, their faces cycling through confusion, recognition, and terror in rapid succession. "Raina!" Quinn scrambled to his feet, grabbing for his shirt. "What are you doing here?" I might ask you the same question, but I think the answer is fairly obvious. I stepped into the cabin behind her, and Mara's face went white. "Brooks, I can explain." "No need," I said, pulling out my phone and starting to record. "I think the visual evidence speaks for itself." "You can't do this!" Quinn lunged toward me, but Raina stepped between us. "Actually, we can," she said calmly. "This is my husband's boat, which makes me a legal owner. Mr. Carvin is here as my guest. You two, on the other hand, are trespassing." "That's ridiculous. This is my boat." "Not according to the divorce papers I filed this morning. As of today, all marital assets are frozen pending court review. That includes this floating love nest." Quinn's face went from red to pale in seconds. "You filed for divorce? Did you think last night was just for show? I told you I was going to destroy your life. I'm a woman of my word." Mara had been trying to get dressed while we talked, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely manage her buttons. "Brooks, please. We can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this." "You're right," I said. "It doesn't have to be like this. It could be much worse." I continued recording as I walked around the cabin, documenting the champagne, the scattered clothing, the rumpled bedding. This is going to make fascinating evidence in our divorce proceedings. You bastard, Quinn snarled, finally finding his courage. You set this up. I didn't set up anything. I just documented what was already happening. The fact that you two are too stupid to conduct your affair with any discretion isn't my fault. Quinn took a step toward me, his fists clenched. I should throw you off this boat. I wouldn't recommend that, Raina said. Assault charges would be the least of your problems, especially since I've already reported the boat stolen. What? As of this morning, this vessel is considered stolen property. The police should be arriving any moment to impound it. As if on cue, we heard the sound of marine patrol boats approaching, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. Quinn's face went through several interesting color changes. You called the cops? I called the Marina Security Office to report that my estranged husband had taken community property without permission. They're required to notify the authorities in cases of potential theft. The marine patrol boats pulled alongside, and uniformed officers began boarding. Mara started crying, not the elegant tears of a wronged woman, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone watching their life fall apart in real time. Ma'am, sir, we're going to need to see some identification, the lead officer said to Quinn and Mara. While they fumbled for their wallets, Raina spoke quietly to the officer, showing him legal documents that I assumed were related to the divorce proceedings. Mr. Vossen, the officer said after reviewing the paperwork, I'm going to need you to step off the vessel. This boat is being impounded as part of ongoing divorce proceedings. This is insane. It's my boat. According to these court documents, ownership is in dispute. Until that's resolved, the vessel needs to remain in neutral custody. As Quinn and Mara were escorted off the boat by the Marine Patrol, I saw several other boats nearby, with people watching the drama unfold. Some of them were taking pictures and videos with their phones. Smile, I called out to Mara as she stumbled down the dock. You're going to be famous. By the time we left the marina, I knew the story would be all over social media within hours. Quinn and Mara, caught in their love nest by their respective spouses, hauled off a stolen boat by the Marine Patrol. It was the kind of scandal that would follow them for years. Phase 2 complete, Raina said as we reached our cars. How are you feeling? Like I'm just getting started, I replied. What's Phase 3? Her smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Phase 3 is where we make sure they never recover from what we've done to them. She handed me another envelope. Quinn's business partners received some additional information today. It seems his embezzlement was more extensive than originally thought. They're filing criminal charges tomorrow. And Mara? The museum board voted unanimously to terminate her employment, effective immediately. No severance, no references, no chance of working in the arts community ever again. I felt a surge of satisfaction that was almost physical. They're finished. Oh, Mr. Carvin, we're nowhere near finished. What we've done so far is just the appetizer. Tomorrow we serve the main course. As I drove home through the dark streets, I thought about the man I'd been just a week ago, trusting, naive, willing to overlook the signs of betrayal, because I wanted to believe in the woman I'd married. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Mara and Quinn had created this version of me through their betrayal. Now they were going to live with the consequences. Or rather, they were going to try to live with them. Because I wasn't done destroying their lives, not even close. The next morning brought news that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Zane burst into my office with a tablet full of social media screenshots and news articles, his face glowing with the excitement of someone witnessing history in the making. Boss, you need to see this. It's gone viral. The video from the marina, taken by some amateur photographer on a nearby boat, had been posted to every major social platform. Within 12 hours, it had been viewed over 1 million times, shared thousands of times, and spawned dozens of memes and commentary videos. Look at this, Zane said, scrolling through the comments. Cheating wife gets caught on stolen boat. When keeping it real goes wrong. Museum curator's private exhibition exposed. They're destroying her online. I watched the video again, noting how clear the footage was. You could see everything. Mara's tears, Quinn's panic, the police escort, my calm documentation of the entire scene. It was better than anything a professional publicist could have created. Any word from Mara? I asked. She's been calling the office all morning. I told her you were unavailable. Good. Let her sweat. My phone rang. Raina. Mr. Carvin, I trust you've seen the morning's entertainment? It's exceeded my wildest expectations. Excellent. Because today we finish this, are you free for lunch? Absolutely. We met at Chez Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in the city. It was the kind of place where politicians made deals and business titans planned hostile takeovers. The perfect venue for what Raina had in mind. I've made reservations for 4, she said as we were seated at a prime table near the center of the dining room. Our guests should be arriving shortly. Guests? I sent messages to both Quinn and your wife this morning. Anonymous tips suggesting that they each had information the other needed to hear. They think they're meeting each other for crisis management. They're walking into an ambush, the most devastating ambush of their lives. Quinn arrived first, looking haggard and desperate. He'd clearly had a rough night. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man watching his world collapse. He spotted us immediately, but seemed confused by my presence. He approached the table cautiously, like a man walking through a minefield. Raina, what's going on? I got a message saying Mara wanted to meet me here. Sit down, Quinn. We're all going to have a civilized conversation. He remained standing, his eyes darting between us. This is a setup. This is a reckoning, I said. Now sit down before you make an even bigger scene. Quinn sat, but he looked ready to bolt at the first opportunity. What do you want? We want you to understand the full scope of what you've lost, Raina said, and what you're going to lose. Before Quinn could respond, Mara walked in. She looked even worse than her lover. Her face was puffy from crying, her clothes looked like she'd slept in them, and she moved with the unsteady gait of someone who'd been drinking heavily. She saw our table and froze, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure terror. What is this? She whispered. Sit down, Mara, I said. We're all going to have a nice lunch and discuss your future, or rather, your lack thereof. She approached the table like she was walking to her own execution, which, in a way, she was. The other diners in the restaurant were beginning to notice the drama unfolding, whispering among themselves and glancing in our direction. I can't do this, Mara said, still standing. I won't be humiliated like this. You humiliated yourself, Raina said calmly. We're just documenting the consequences. Please, Quinn said, his voice cracking. Haven't you done enough? We get it. We made mistakes. We're sorry. Sorry? I laughed. And it sounded harsh, even to my own ears. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. A waiter approached, clearly uncomfortable with the tension at our table. Would you like to order drinks? Champagne, Raina said. Your best bottle. We're celebrating. The waiter left, and Mara finally sat down, collapsing into her chair like a broken doll. What do you want from us? She asked. We want you to understand that actions have consequences, I said. Real, permanent, life-altering consequences. Raina opened her purse and withdrew 2 thick envelopes. Quinn, your business partners voted unanimously to dissolve your partnership. You're being bought out at the minimum price specified in your contract, and they're pursuing criminal charges for embezzlement. She slid 1 envelope across to him. Those are the formal documents. You have 72 hours to clean out your office. Quinn opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the legal documents inside. With each page, his face grew paler. This can't be legal. It's completely legal. I helped draft your partnership agreement, remember? I made sure it included provisions for exactly this situation. She turned to Mara. As for you, the museum board has voted to terminate your employment and pursue civil action to recover any funds you may have misappropriated during your tenure. I never stole anything. No, but you used museum resources to facilitate your affair. Company time, company equipment, company facilities. That's theft of services, and it's actionable. The champagne arrived, and Raina made a show of tasting it and nodding approval. The waiter poured 4 glasses, though neither Quinn nor Mara touched theirs. A toast, Raina said, raising her glass. To the end of an era. I raised my glass as well, to getting exactly what you deserve. Other diners were now openly staring at our table. Some were holding up phones, recording the confrontation. I saw several people I recognized from the business community, all watching the destruction of 2 careers with fascination. You're enjoying this, Mara said. tears streaming down her face. I'm enjoying justice, and I replied, and there's a difference. Quinn suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, Raina said, because I'm not finished. She pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. I've just sent a detailed report to the State Licensing Board, documenting your use of privileged information to gain unfair advantages in municipal contracts. Your architecture license is being suspended pending investigation. Quinn stared at the phone like it was a weapon pointed at his heart. You're destroying my entire career. You destroyed your career the moment you decided to betray me. And you, I said to Mara, are about to discover that the art world is smaller than you think. Raina has been very thorough in documenting your professional lapses to every major museum, gallery, and cultural institution in the region. Mara's face went white. You can't do that. We already did. As of this morning, you're effectively blacklisted from the entire arts community. The waiter returned, clearly nervous about the scene unfolding at our table. Are you ready to order? Actually, I said, standing up, I think we're finished here. I threw a $100 bill on the table. For the champagne and the entertainment? As Rain and I walked toward the exit, I could hear Mara sobbing behind us. Quinn was trying to comfort her, but his own voice was shaking with barely controlled panic. Where will we go? Mara was saying. What will we do? I don't know, Quinn replied. I just don't know. Outside the restaurant, Raina and I paused on the sidewalk. The afternoon sun felt warm on my face. And for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. How do you feel? She asked. Like I can finally breathe again. Any regrets? I thought about the question seriously. A week ago, I might have felt guilty about the destruction we'd wrought. But watching Mara cry in that restaurant, seeing Quinn's career collapse in real time, it felt like justice. Pure, perfect justice. None whatsoever, Raina smiled. Good. Because there's one more thing. She handed me a final envelope. Quinn's criminal trial starts in 6 weeks. The prosecutor's office has asked if you'd be willing to testify about the impact of his embezzlement on the municipal contract process. Absolutely. And Mara's civil trial is scheduled for next month. The museum's insurance company wants to pursue full restitution for the damage to their reputation. I looked back through the restaurant window where Quinn and Mara were still sitting at our abandoned table, surrounded by the wreckage of their lives. They looked small and broken, like children who'd finally been caught after years of getting away with increasingly serious misbehavior. You know what the best part is? I said to Raina. What's that? They did this to themselves. Every single consequence they're facing is the direct result of choices they made. We didn't destroy them. We just made sure they couldn't escape the destruction they'd already set in motion. Raina nodded. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about making someone pay for hurting you. Justice is about making sure they pay for what they actually did. As we walked away from the restaurant, I felt a profound sense of closure. The man I'd been a week ago, trusting, naive, willing to overlook betrayal, was gone forever. In his place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who might think of crossing him. Mara and Quinn had taught me that lesson through their betrayal. Now they were going to live with the consequences of that education for the rest of their lives. I was at dinner with a stunning woman when my wife stormed in and yelled, "Who is she?" I smiled and said, "Meet your partner's wife. We're finalizing everything." That was the last thing she managed to hear before security escorted her out of our lives forever. Some lessons are worth learning, no matter how much they cost to teach.